Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the 2021 Newhallywood Silent Film Festival. I'm E.J. Stevens, and one of the things that we've been really trying to accomplish during this online 2021 film festival is to reach out to a lot of other silent organizations, silent film festivals, silent people that are interested in the genre, and to help give them a platform to tell them what they're doing. And one of the people here that's really doing some awesome work in Southern California is Tom Barnes.
Hi, EJ.
And Tom, you are the head of Retroformat.
I am. We're a Los Angeles-based nonprofit, and our mission is to promote education and enthusiasm about the art of silent film.
Yeah, and so how long have you guys been together now?
Well, it's kind of a long story. I guess the shorter answer is we've been incorporated for about 2.5 years. We've been a nonprofit for, it's hard to believe, about 1.5 years now. But
yeah, and
we've been doing shows under the name Retroformat for over 10 years.
Tell us how your basic shows go.
Well, in the best of times, we do live theatrical shows, but our nonprofit actually has 3 different arms at this point. We started out by doing shows on 8mm and 16mm at the Egyptian Theater to raise funds for the American Cinematheque. And that show ran for 10 years. We became a nonprofit, as I said, a couple of years ago, and started expanding what we were doing. We formed a board of directors, and one of our board members is Dino Everett of the USC. He's the curator of the Hugh Hefner Moving Image Archive. And through Dino, we have gotten access to a pretty vast 16mm collection of silent films. And we started a series using films from that collection at the Women's Club of Hollywood. Well, we're an ambitious organization, and we expanded into more conventional theatrical screenings last year. And we did our first 35mm screening at the beautiful Hollywood Legion Theater. We did a screening of the 1925 Chaplin, The Gold Rush.
Oh, wow.
We were very proud of. And that show was very successful. We sold out. And unfortunately, our follow-up screening, which was going to be Harold Lloyd in Safety Last, had to be canceled due to COVID. And we sort of had the rug pulled out from under us just as we were getting started with all that.
Yeah, I think a lot of us are feeling that way. Yeah. During this time.
Well, we do, in addition to theatrical screenings, we do online outreach. We have a monthly, bi-weekly, or rather a monthly webcast. We have free educational programming we do for public schools. And right now we do a monthly presentation for the Laurel Magnet School for their 6th, 7th, and 8th graders.
How does that work? Do you go and show films? Or?
Yes, well, in the best of times, we do it in person, but for the last several months, we've been doing it over Zoom, and I'm very proud of that show. We have taken some amazing guests in to speak to the students. We've had Suzanne Lloyd talk about her grandfather, Harold Lloyd. We had Ron Chaney last October. We did a special presentation about Lon Senior. Well, just 2 weeks ago, we did a presentation on women film pioneers, and we had Shelley Stamp, professor at UC Santa Cruz, who spoke to the students about the women pioneers. So I'm really proud of the work that we're doing there.
That sounds like a great program. Now, do you show some of, like when you had Suzanne Lloyd, did you show some of her grandfather's films to the kids?
We absolutely do. And in fact, we have found that it's best to make the film presentation the larger part of the presentation. The kids respond really well to the film.
That's what I was going to say. How do the kids like it? I'm sure they loved it, right?
They love it. Yes, absolutely. And especially, uh, COVID has been so hard on everybody, and having to do the classrooms remotely. We have become something that I think they really look forward to. That's what they tell me, and I believe them. Um, it's kind of a bright spot for them. But we are looking forward to the day when we can get back into the classroom and do them in person. When we first started, um, we went into the classroom with our 16 millimeter projectors, and myself and our musical director, Cliff Ritalik. And Cliff
Mhm.
played live for the students.
Oh, they had to love that.
Yeah, yeah. And we did three presentations each time we went in, three different classrooms. They have film classes for the sixth, seventh, and eighth graders, and we also played for the special education students. And we answered questions, and they were fascinated by the films, and they were fascinated by Cliff and his musicianship.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah. I remember we used to do a thing here at the Heritage Junction up in Newhall where we would do a thing called Friday Night Flickers, and we would have Bob Mitchell, who I think you
Oh yeah.
you were familiar with. Yeah, Bob Mitchell would come and play for people in the same train station where Chaplin filmed The Pilgrim, which was really incredible. And for those of you who don't know, Bob was 95 at the time, and he was one of the last pianists who played for the silent films when they came out, who was still doing it today. It was amazing. And I remember especially the little kids just howling at Buster and Harold, and I don't think I'd ever heard laughing like that in a modern theater in years.
I remember when we took Harold Lloyd's Get Out and Get Under and showed it in the classroom on 16 millimeter. The kids were literally screaming. It went so beautifully. And Suzanne Lloyd relates really well with the kids. We have really enjoyed taking her. We've taken her with us more than once, and
Hmm.
she's a wonderful speaker for them.
Tom, how big of an organization are we talking about here with Retroformat?
Well, I think you would say that we are a handful of people. There's our board of directors, and there's a couple of teams of volunteers. Uh, it really speaks to the power of our mission of education and creating enthusiasm about the art of silent film, that we've been able to get some really amazing people on board from the beginning. The great writer director Alexander Payne was one of our very first board members to come on, and we also have Allison Anders, who is another amazingly talented and brilliant person who is one of our founding board members. We have Barbara Smith, who shepherded the American Cinematheque through its
Hmm.
heyday back in the 90s and teens. She's an amazing woman, and we're really grateful to her for her support in helping us get started. And of course, I think I mentioned Dino Everett at USC, who's the curator of the Hugh Hefner Moving Image Archive. Um, we have Andrew Schwartz, who's a local attorney,
Hmm.
and we have several, I guess you would call them working board members. Of course, myself and Carrie Bible, who I believe
Which
you
who we know well, yes.
uh-huh. Sean P. Malone is a cinematographer who also directs and hosts our monthly webcast. He's a wonderful, dedicated volunteer. And Dave Slaughter. Some of your viewers may know Dave Slaughter from Ian Kennedy's documentary about the silent movie theater, Palace of Silence. And
Right, right, right.
Ian Kennedy is also one of our board members.
Okay.
But David Slaughter is the head of our scanning program, and he's an amazing guy. So we have some really wonderful, dedicated people. Uh, I'm afraid I'm going to leave somebody important out. Uh, but in addition to the board members, we have a lot of volunteers. Our scanning program now is actually a team of, I don't even know, 6 or 7 people. Uh, who are working thanklessly behind the scenes just because they love what they're doing. And we have several other people as well, people who help with our webcast. Cliff Ritalik and Marie Ritalik also have been instrumental in getting that webcast off the ground, and they do a lot of work, really hard work every month to make that happen, and we're really grateful to them.
What are your plans for the future with Retroformat?
Well, we're committed to leading a renaissance in appreciation for silent films, and we're just dying for the theaters to open back up. But in the meantime, we've been working for several months on the creation of an online library that is actually going to make its premiere this spring. We will be taking some truly great silent film artists out of obscurity with names like Al Christie, Helen Holmes, Dorothy DeVore, William S. Hart. We're going to have a subscription service where you can see some of the lesser known and harder to find silent films in really beautiful editions with great music, and we're very excited about it.
Well, that's great. So I imagine you've been working on that during COVID, correct?
We sure have. When COVID hit and knocked us out of the theaters, we had to completely rethink our strategy, and we started experimenting with doing shows online, and we did a couple of live shows on Facebook. The first one was just a total disaster. Just, I mean, my gosh, what a nightmare that was. But I mean, there's so many things that can go wrong. We did finally learn that you know, it's best to pre-tape our shows. You know, don't trust anything to luck online.
Right.
But, we've been doing our webcasts regularly since then. We're now doing them monthly. And I'm very proud of that. Our entire staff, everybody who works on Retroformat is a volunteer. Nobody's getting paid. And I think it's amazing what we've been able to pull off.
Oh, absolutely.
But we are going to continue doing our free webcast as well as making our subscription service available. But we basically, you know, Retroformat has operated historically through access to private collections. There's my own collection of silent films on 8mm and 16mm. Has over 1,200 titles.
Wow.
And we have, as I said, around 1,000 silent films available through the USC Hefner collection. And there are other private collectors who are offering to help us. And so we purchased a scanner. It took something like 4.5 months to get it. It had to be built to order. And because of COVID, everything was delayed. My board of directors, in fact, I think they didn't think we were ever actually going to get it, but it finally came. Then we had to learn to use it. And fortunately, we have on our board David Slaughter, who has worked professionally in film preservation. He worked for Technicolor in post-production for many years, and he's a brilliant guy. He is heading up our scanning program, and he's really the brains behind the outfit. He's organized the entire team. He is the guy who has the technical smarts to run the scanner and figure out what needs to be done in terms of color correction and so on. But we're putting together some really beautiful presentations from a lot of these films that will be premiering very soon. And as I said, we're extremely excited about it. It's something that's been a long time coming, but you'll be able to see some of our work on our free webcast in a couple of months. And we're working on a presentation that's going to be part of the Kansas Silent Film Festival, I believe at the end of this month.
Yeah, we talked to Bill Schaefer a couple days ago, and he mentioned your presentation. Yeah,
Great, great.
yeah. So where do people go to get to Retroformat online?
Well, I would invite everyone watching this to check out our website at retroformat.org. So you can sign up for our email list and find out exactly what we're up to. You can easily also make a donation there. Individual donations are our lifeblood, especially at this point. They make everything that we do possible.
How did you get involved in this, Tom? What's your background?
Well, I am really just a collector. I started collecting films when I was 12 years old, and I hope I don't look as old as I actually am, but I started collecting from Black Hawk Films back in the days when you could mail order 8 millimeter and 16 millimeter prints. And the first film that I bought from them, in fact, was Nosferatu. Uh,
Mm.
which
Hmm.
was a really exciting event to be able to see that when I was 12 years old. And
Sure.
some of the younger people watching this may not um, know that back in that day, there was really no other way to see films like that other than to just buy your own copy. Um, I had seen a few silent films on PBS. I think it wasn't called PBS back then, it was educational television.
Hmm.
Uh, but there was a series called The Silent Years that was hosted by Orson Welles and then Lillian Gish, and
Wow.
you could see silent films once a week for 2 years. That was it. You know, other than that, there were no opportunities to see silent films. And uh, but Black Hawk Films was an amazing company out of Iowa, and they had quite a catalog of films that they had copied onto reduction prints, 8 millimeter and 16, that you could purchase, and they were known for their high quality. Um, Black Hawk was run by some really smart, dedicated people, and we will actually be in our library making available a number of the old Black Hawk prints, complete with their opening titles. The Black
Mm.
Hawk prints were famous for these sometimes crazy introductions at the start of the film in the form of title cards, usually limited to, I think, about 5 cards. But they would give you history and some background on the film and the artists involved. And they were written usually anonymously by people like uh, Edward Wagenknecht and Anthony Slide, who is now on Retroformat's board of advisors.
Is that
Uh,
right?
yes, some really important scholars and historians of films. And there has been no effort made, or no organized effort made, to preserve these writings until now. So I'm really proud that Retroformat can at least get a start on that. And we will have a lot of that material preserved online for future generations. Um, I spoke to Serge Bromberg, who
Mm.
owns the modern Black Hawk films, and of course, they have a library of original materials, negatives, and 35 millimeter archival prints, and so on. And all of that material is now being scanned and preserved by the Academy. But there is no organized effort, and never has been, to save the actual prints that Black Hawk Films manufactured way back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, with their unique introductions and so on. And so that is a service that we're going to provide.
That sounds awesome. It sounds like you're just doing some incredible work there, and work that will benefit future generations, not just us now. So
I
well
hope so.
done.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we're really excited about it. And we also have a wonderful musician working with us, Cliff Ritalik, as I mentioned before.
Hmm.
We really owe him a debt of gratitude, because there would be no Retroformat without Cliff. And the fact that he was willing to donate his talent and his time to those 8 mm screenings that I did years ago at the Egyptian Theater. He did those for free for years and years and years. And I think that speaks volumes about his dedication to the art and preserving the art and in the experience of seeing these silent films. And of course, there is nothing like seeing the films in a theater. As you mentioned earlier, seeing the way the kids respond to the comedies. That's true of adults too. When we showed the Gold Rush in 35 mm at the Hollywood Legion, we had an audience of 500 people.
Wow.
And I will never forget, I was sitting in the very back so that I could sort of see the entire audience respond. And through the entire film, everybody was sitting forward like this in their seats. And the first shot where you see Charlie Chaplin in that film, he is seen from a distance in a long shot, just walking along the side of a mountain with that unique walk of his. And at the very first sight of him, it was just the most awesome experience. This low roar of laughter just started to swell through the theater. And there's something that's so contagious about that. And yet it's also so unique to silent film. And the truth is that there are only a very small number of people alive today who have had the experience of attending a public silent movie screening with live musical accompaniment.
Right.
And, if we lose this part of our history, we'll lose our understanding of how the most important art form of our time evolved, and how people a century ago viewed the social problems that are affecting and shaping our lives today. And we'll also lose the experience of seeing some really amazing art. So I think it's imperative that the remaining silent films, which they say only 10 to 15% of the silent films that were ever made still exist today, 100 years later. It's imperative that what remains be appreciated and enjoyed. Otherwise, there will be no impetus to continue to preserve it, because the preservation never ends. It has to be a continuing process. And there's also, of course, there may be ongoing discovery of more stuff that can be saved, which is always an exciting prospect.
Well, you are definitely preaching to the choir, and I completely agree with your efforts and your motives there, because I think a lot of people who aren't familiar with silent film, like you were saying, when you watch a silent film, you have to be more engaged than you do in a talkie typically. And so I remember noticing that whole phenomenon myself, when I would just notice everybody leaning forward. I know exactly what you're saying, because there is something about the silent film that pulls you closer, pulls you in.
It's true, and it's a completely different way of viewing. One of our friends, Tracy Gessel, who you probably know, she was speaking to our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders about that very phenomenon of how television has trained us to watch a certain way, which is kind of halfway, to be halfway engaged and wait for the music to tell you when to look up and see what's happening on the screen.
Well, and you're also, I'm sure, creating an audience with some of those folks for coming generations, because as we know, this is kind of a war of attrition, and we have to get the young people really interested in this, or this art form will be forgotten.
Sure. And well, it's kind of interesting to me, because I'm old enough to remember how past generations perceived silent films. Growing up in the 60s and 70s, these films looked much older then than they do now. Something interesting has happened as our perspective has shifted with time. And now that the films are actually a century old, a lot of the things that seemed silly and old-fashioned I hate to say 50 years ago, but uh, you know, our culture has moved on, and now those things are fresh. And you know, they say everything old is new again. It's really true. There is a freshness to the experience that I think people, say a generation or two before me, probably couldn't appreciate the way we do now. And so I think it is truly time for a public renaissance and appreciation. And I think that retro format, um, part of our purpose is to help lead that renaissance and appreciation.
Well, you certainly are doing that, and you just made me think of something. Yeah, I used to watch I remember a few silent films from when I was young on TV, and they were awful quality, and
Mhm.
so they did look older. You know, they did look alien, but because of
But
the
they were
efforts of
also,
folks like you
yeah,
know,
they're
and
also run at bizarre
at
speeds.
bizarre speeds, right? They have the speed wrong, but that's why the work you're doing is so important because I think I think Retroformat and other organizations like you are showing these films as they were originally shown, and so it does help, I think, to bring that what is old is new again feeling
Mhm.
back to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I can't say it enough. We are dying for the theaters to open again. We are not planning to limit our theatrical screenings to Hollywood and Los Angeles. We're going to take them first into surrounding counties and different parts of California, and eventually all over America. If any of our viewers are inclined to make an individual donation, that
Sure.
is our lifeblood right now.
Sure.
That is the only income that we have, and we really appreciate the support.
Well, Tom, we really appreciate your efforts and we thank you very much for your time meeting with us today. Maybe in the future, Retroformat and the New Hollywood Silent Film Festival can, I hope we can work together to really
Well,
showcase a lot of these films in
I
coming
know we will.
years.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tom. I appreciate your work, appreciate your time,
Sure. Thank
and
you,
you have a
EJ. It
great
was a
rest of your day. Yeah.
thanks.
Okay.
You too.
And thank you all for watching us here at the 2021 New Hollywood Silent Film Festival.